So yesterday we made a video that I thought was really interesting. It talked about the Montreal Canadiens and top prospect David Reinbacher. And sure, the Reinbacher conversation is not one that we have not had in the past. We made a bunch of videos over the past few months ever since this guy was taken by the Canadiens in the 5th overall spot in the 2023 draft. He was a very controversial pick. Controversial, I'd say, probably applies more so to the fan base rather than the NHL executives who are making the draft picks in the first place, mostly because of some of the, the information that we had learned regarding the draft heading into the event, as well as how other teams seemed to view this guy. You can talk all you want about how the Montreal Canadiens have themselves a prospect who is going to bust or a guy who is not going to become what the Canadiens wanted him to become. Is he good? Is he bad? Is he whatever? He was great last year. This year he could be considered to be struggling a little bit in the Swiss League. And so with David Reinbacher, there's always going to be a sort of idea floating around as to whether or not the Montreal Canadiens actually made the right choice. But this video is one that I think, holistically, could be seen as quite shocking. Because what I wanted to do in this video was try to illustrate just how much the Montreal Canadiens believe in this guy. Now, I get it, there are some concerns, and we did bring up those concerns over multiple videos when he was initially drafted. The comment that I was always spooked out by was the one where Kent Hughes pretty much said that they wouldn't have valued this player as much as they did if this player wasn't a right-handed defenseman. It made it seem so much so like the Canadiens were drafting for need rather than for talent because you know how the philosophy goes, right? Best player available, the BPA. You take players who are going to be better and more valuable to other players regardless of what they play, regardless of what position they're on the ice. Because if you're that high up in the draft at 5th overall, you can't afford to make a dud draftee. You cannot afford to have a future 50-goal, 60-goal, maybe 100-point guy go immediately after you. Everybody likes to talk about the guy who went 2 picks after David Reinbacher, Matvei Michkov, but when it comes to the fact that the Canadiens passed up on a guy that was supposed to be in the same realm of status as Connor Bedard, we actually do have ourselves quite a few more things that support the idea that the Montreal Canadiens just really gosh darn believe in Reinbacher. And if there was any doubt heading into the offseason and eventually this season because of the comments that Kent Hughes made, it should be noted that with all of these extra things, there really shouldn't be any doubts that the Canadiens have faith in Reinbacher. Now, the reason I say that is because of a comment made on the Habs sub. This post was made by GoHabsGo31. It's the same Twitter thread from Charlie O'Connor that we talked about yesterday, wherein we discussed the David Reinbacher Cutter Gauthier rejected trade by the Montreal Canadiens. Take a look at the top comment made by Wooly26. Here's the way I see it. The Montreal Canadiens turned down Yaroslav Askarov and a first. The Habs turned down Cutter Gauthier. The Habs didn't draft Matvei Michkov. The Habs didn't draft Benson or Leonard. The Habs really love David Reinbacher. There's obviously something they see that we don't. Now, that comment has a little bit of an attitude towards it, especially in the way that it phrases that last sentence. The Habs see something that the Canadiens fan base really doesn't. And you could go out there and say, okay, well, that's not the first time that an NHL team has been unrealistically hyped up about a prospect that didn't deserve it. Or maybe the Canadiens are just that gosh darn delusional about the David Reinbacher pick because, David Reinbacher, right-handed defenseman, big guy. If you want to talk about a comparable player, Moritz Seider is the one that comes to most people's minds, although there is a debate to be had as to whether or not Reinbacher could exhibit the same ceiling that Seider ended up having. But when you think about these individual transactions, or lack thereof transactions, that the Canadiens turned away, it makes it a lot more intriguing to acknowledge just how much they believe in this guy. They did turn down the idea of getting Yaroslav Askarov and a first-round pick from earlier in the draft. That was a big conversation, and it was one that we talked about in spades in multiple videos after last year's draft as well. Askarov is one of the top goaltending prospects in the NHL. This season, he is at a .943 save percentage in 2 NHL games played, all at 21 years old. The Canadiens rejected this guy and a first-round pick. Cutter Gauthier, we had talked about him yesterday. That was the entire big power forward guy, superstar sniper caliber prospect at the World Juniors. You could debate that there were a few extenuating circumstances that would have made a Cutter Gauthier trade to Montreal a little bit more difficult than the inevitable trade that happened to Anaheim. But all of those situations aside, there still are a few extra things. That the Canadiens did not draft Matvei Michkov, that they didn't draft Ryan Leonard, that they didn't draft Zach Benson. There were so many guys on the chopping block that many people thought had higher ceilings, and that the Canadiens just said straight up no. Like, we want David Reinbacher, we want the right-handed defenseman, we want this talented specimen of a human being, and we feel he is going to be really great for us as his career goes on. Now, as time goes on, you could debate whether or not that's actually the right move, especially when you consider where Reinbacher has gone with this season's worth of play. And even in the comment section of this Reddit thread, I mean, the final word from Wooly, there's obviously something that the Canadiens see that we don't. Dalibor goes out there and replies, yeah, I'm sure that we tune into Colton versus Rapperswill's games to get an idea. Kind of just poking fun at Canadiens fans and saying, yeah, like, how many Montreal Canadiens fans actually go out there and watch Swiss League games and try to pay attention to what Reinbacher is doing? You gotta go out there and think about it, man. Like, EHC Kloten this season is one of the worst teams in the Swiss League. Go over to the information for the NL and see where they are in the standings, and they've got 8 wins in 36 games played. They have 124 goals against, which is the worst in the entire league. Their goal differential is the worst in the entire league. This team sucks, and David Reinbacher, I mean, goodness gracious, he's doing his best to try to pull this team forward. It's just really difficult to do that when nobody else in the team is able to pull their weight. Going back over to the Reddit thread, you have to go out and read some more of these comments. They do provide some interesting perspectives. Pofolk, the Magniferous, goes out there and says, the comparable player that I would use for Reinbacher's development path is Miro Heiskanen. He should develop into a smart, smooth skating two-way defenseman who can play big minutes on a top pairing, but not necessarily an elite power play one quarterback. A very valuable player to have. And then there is a few extra replies debating, oh, is Heiskanen really like the right model? Is that the kind of guy you would want to expect out of Reinbacher? I see more so of the mobility and the stability of a Seider type rather than the roving flexibility and the lankiness that a Heiskanen provides. But then another comment from Background Miserable 5 has a really interesting perspective. The Montreal Canadiens just see David Reinbacher as Lane Hutson's partner. And when you think about it like that, hey, that makes sense, right? You want the shut down, more defensively responsible name to play with Lane Hutson so that Hutson can do what it is that Hutson is good at doing, and so that he's able to do it with impunity, where if he gets caught and he gives the puck up and there's a 2-on-1 the opposite way, he's not getting severely punished because Reinbacher is there to bail him out at the blue line. There are a number of hypothetical situations where you could say that having a defensively minded stud like Reinbacher would be the best case scenario for a developing player like Hutson to play with. But then you also have to go devil's advocate. Is it really worth passing up on Cutter Gauthier, who could become an 80-90 point player with 40-50 goal potential? Is it worth it passing up on Matvei Michkov, who could have the same numbers, but in a more dynamic goal-scoring fashion? Is it worth it to pass up on Ryan Leonard or Zach Benson, or a goalie of the future in Yaroslav Askarov, as well as a first-round pick? Is it worth all of that to say that at the end of the day you got David Reinbacher? Is Reinbacher that good that you can walk away from all these other important assets and think about it as if you won by not trading your guy away? That is what's so shocking about this entire Reinbacher situation, because it adds on to all the list of things that the Canadiens refuse to do and assets they refuse to get if it meant giving up on David Reinbacher. They love this guy. And so, for the Montreal Canadiens fans, it's easy to say that they may have been wrong in their assessments based off of how Reinbacher's numbers look on paper, but he's playing on a bad team in Switzerland, he's getting better, all we gotta do is wait and see. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about David Reinbacher and the fact that the Canadiens dropped all this stuff in order to get him and keep him in their system? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.